Yeah, yeah, it's not essential. You just don't need it. It'd be excess. It'd be, huh? All right, gives you 2 petri dishes, you only need 1. So that would be the only reason that there's not that many individuated units of consciousness that you need that many planets with people in the evolution. If you don't, then there's no point. You just make what you need, and the rest of it is window dressing. So it's possible. So, don't know about that one. See, that's yeah, you can get information, but you can't believe it, because you can't believe anything you hear. No, and I would say that to you about me as well. You can't believe what I tell you. You need to think for yourself. I don't want anybody to believe me, because that doesn't take you anywhere important. If all you do is believe me, then what have you got? Nothing but a belief. You're stuck. What if information comes along that tells you contrary? You're stuck. Can't believe me, can't believe anything. But what you can do is have open-minded skepticism, and you deal with the probabilities and say, well, this is the best thing I've heard yet. It explains a lot of things, so I'll give that, and it explains physics. You know, it does quantum mechanics, does relativity, does all this hard science stuff. So I'll give it a 0.7, 0.8, or if you're really skeptical, 0.5. You know, I'll give it something, and just keep it like that until you get more information. If you don't get any more information, let it stay like that. And it doesn't matter that much, because you're still going to do what you do. You're going to be making choices and trying to grow up. And you know, what you believe or disbelieve is kind of irrelevant to that. You get choices and you make them, and you grow up, you evolve or you de-evolve. So it doesn't matter so much. One of the key things you have to learn is to live gracefully with uncertainty. There's just a lot of things we don't know, and that has to be okay. Because if that rubs at you that you don't know and you have to find out, and you got this drive to know and find out, that's not helpful. See, that's getting in your way. That's extra effort, spinning your wheels, and it's not going anywhere. It's better just to realize there's some things we just don't know. And we're not going to know them. And some of them are impossible to know, which means it's illogical. We can't know them, because you can't watch yourself being born. There's some things that you just won't know. And it's life, you know? Like, live with it, right? That's the idea. And you have to do that with these entities you're going to talk to. There's a lot about them you don't know. You don't know who they are, you don't know why they're talking to you, you don't know what they're telling you, whether it's true or not. You don't know anything about them. But you're open, and you go with it. You're uncertain, you're skeptical, and in months and months and lots of conversation, you'll figure that out. That skepticism will change. You'll either go down or it'll go up. Your probability of the value that you get. What's the probability I'm going to get some good value out of this? Well, it starts kind of, I don't know, 50-50 maybe. Then after 10 or so interactions, maybe it's gone down to 20-80. You're just not getting anywhere. And then another 10 interactions, maybe it's 10-90, and then it's time to let it go. Or maybe it goes the other way, and it seems valuable to you. Well, then the probability of it being useful starts going up. But you should almost have nothing that ever gets to a 1 or a 0, because both of those leave no uncertainty. Things that are uncertain are hard to come by. There's not much that doesn't have any uncertainty around it. So just learn to live gracefully with uncertainty. There's a lot we never know. But we'll deal with it anyway, and we'll be open. And we won't think of it negative before we have good reason to do that.
So our definition that we attempted here through the vectors didn't work, but we have them with the metric tensor. And we therefore have this definition. And remember what we want the Christoffel symbols for. We need the Christoffel symbols primarily in order to define the covariant derivative. And for the covariant derivative to have the tensor property, in other words, to produce the tensor output for tensor inputs, we only need a symbol, such as the Christoffel symbol, that changes according to a certain rule under change of coordinates. And a symbol defined in this way will change according to the right way, in order to the way that would lead to a great covariant derivative. So on the surface, by analogy, or actually in any space, or in any manifold in which the metric tensor is defined the way we did it, or arbitrarily given a priori, if you write down a definition like this, you will have an object that changes according to the way you want from one coordinate system to the other. And it is therefore can be used in the definition of the covariant derivative, and everything's great. So this is one of the ways, the intrinsic way of introducing the Christoffel symbol, and it works just fine. However, we don't want to quite give up on our extrinsic approach that uses the covariant basis, because it's a very geometrically intuitive and very visual object. We don't want to give up our geometric intuition just yet, and we really want to be able to use and work with the covariant basis because it's such a great object. So I will now write down what previously was used as a consequence of the definition of the Christoffel symbol, but it will now serve as the definition of the Christoffel symbol. And it is this. Alpha beta is this dot product. But remember before, it followed from this definition by dotting both sides with the contravariant basis element. And these were the explicit components of this object with respect to this object. Now it can no longer be interpreted as the explicit components of this object with respect to the contravariant basis, because this object cannot be decomposed with respect to the covariant basis. However, it's still 8 numbers, and because it has this form, the same form as in the Euclidean space, of course it'll change by not necessarily the same rule, but completely analogous rule to the way it changed in Euclidean spaces. Because this can be taken as the definition in both cases, and then all of the analysis would be the same, and the rule by which this symbol is changing, actually that was one of the topics that I'm planning on backfilling. Today is April 21st, so if you're watching this a month or so from now, it's probably backfilled already, and you've seen it. If you're watching it shortly after I uploaded this, then you might not have seen it, but of course it's all over the book. Okay. So this changes according to the rule that we want, and we can therefore use this object to define the covariant derivative, which is defined by the exact same rule as before. It's the partial derivative plus a Christoffel adjustment term for each of the indices of the object. Alright, so now let's assume that the Christoffel symbol has been defined and that the covariant derivative has been defined. And that's now because it's defined by the same rule. And let's now study the properties of the covariant derivative. So it's a big jump, but it's fair because it's exactly analogous. So you can review those lectures and replace Z's with S's and Latin indices with Greek indices, and everything will work the same. Except one thing, and that's the one thing we'll concentrate on right now. Let's talk about the metronyllic property as applied to the covariant basis. Okay. So here's the big question. What is the covariant derivative on the surface, the covariant surface derivative of the covariant basis? In the Euclidean space, in the ambient space, this was 9 zeros. That was the metronyllic, one of the elements of the metronyllic property of the covariant derivative. The covariant derivative applied to the covariant basis, the contravariant basis, is 0. Or a whole lot of zeros. In this case, it would have been 9 zeros. But here we have 4 vectors. And we should have some doubt as to whether or not this would be 0, because after all, these guys do curve, And because this is designed to capture the rate of change of this vector, because they do curve, maybe we won't quite get 0. Okay. I realize now I should put a little bit more space here. You'll see in a moment why. So let's write down this definition. So we have d, my definition is ds beta, ds alpha, minus, because it's a covariant type thing, minus gamma, alpha, beta, omega, I will use here, S. Okay. Is this 0? Well, we're not sure. Previously we concluded that in the Euclidean space that this expression was 0 was a very easy conclusion, because this term was exactly this term, because this term was merely a decomposition of this term with respect to the covariant basis. So at this point we observed that this expression is easily seen to be 0, and that was that. Now we have this definition of the Christoffel symbol. We've had to give up, it's not up to us even, that this object can no longer be decomposed with respect to this basis. So none of these 4 vectors can be decomposed with respect to the covariant basis. So we can no longer conclude that this is 0. In fact, it's not. But let's see what we could conclude. Let's dot both sides of this expression. I'll use yellow chalk so you see the contrast with